Good evening. Welcome to the June 7th Instructional Committee meeting of the Wallingford Board of Education. Our first item of business tonight is to accept our meeting minutes from May 10th, 2021. And we will start with Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Raccio.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Votto.
Mr. Who?
Votto.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Reynolds.
Yes.
Thank you. And Mrs. Corso, yes. So those should be all set. Our next item of business, we have quite a bit of curriculum on deck tonight. So we're going to start with Mrs. Medancy.
Hi, everybody. So what I have for you to review tonight are two Algebra 2 units. Last year, after implementing Common Core a few years back, we've gone through our first review cycle with our high school curriculums. Last year, we refined and revised Algebra 1 and Geometry, and so this is the next course in that progression. We had to wait to look at Algebra 2 until we were 2 years out from the students in the new Algebra 1 revisions. So this is kind of, to piggyback off of that Algebra 1. The first unit we had to revise because a lot of what we had in our original Unit 1 is now in our Algebra 1 course, and we didn't want to repeat. We wanted to build on and make sure it was coherent. So we updated Unit 1. And our Unit 8 is a culminating unit that we think is important to kind of bring everything in Algebra 2 together before students move on to pre-calculus. The Unit 8 right now is going to be an if-time unit because of COVID the last 2 years. There's some topics in Algebra 1 that we may not have gotten to last year and this year, or at least gotten to in a really good way. So we want to make sure that we teach it with fidelity before we go on. So there's some topics in Algebra 2 that we're keeping for now that eventually are going to shift down permanently to Algebra 1, and that's our quadratics unit. So it is still in there. We didn't touch it yet, but eventually we do want to delete that from Algebra 2, which will give us time for that Unit 8.
Thank you, Mrs. Medancy. Does anybody have any questions about either of these algebra units? I just want to comment that I'm really glad I don't have algebra now, that I took algebra 25 years ago.
You could do it. We'd get you through.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take consensus. We're taking consensus, correct? Let me go back.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. We'll start with Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
Ms. Raccio.
Yes.
Mr. Votto.
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds.
Yes.
And Mrs. Corso, yes. Thank you, Mrs. Medancy. You're welcome to stay on, but I think you're all set for the evening.
Great. Thank you. I'll go eat my dinner now.
Bye-bye. Okay, so our next curriculum that we're going to discuss is world language. So, Ms. Moore.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Mrs. Corso, would it be okay to talk about Spanish and French together, or should we kind of separate them out given that they're different agenda items?
Separate them out. Okay. Yep.
Okay. So this course is students' second year engaging full-time with the language. They have had exposure to the language in grades 3 through 5, but once we hit our middle school program, students are engaging with their world language course as often as they're engaging with math, science, English, and social studies. Here we see students beginning to understand connected sentences that they hear or read, as opposed to just singular sentences or isolated phrases. And then they're also moving towards being able to output at that level as well, orally and in writing. So moving towards being able to recreate a bit with the language, rather than just kind of reproduce learned words and phrases in isolation. Simultaneously, while they're continuing to work on reading, writing, listening, and speaking, students develop their intercultural competence. As culture and language are inextricably linked, so you'll notice that as content, as grammar and vocabulary are introduced, that's always in the nest of a cultural context, so that the students are thinking of the language when they're thinking of the culture, and vice versa. All of the units culminate in an integrated performance assessment, which is an opportunity for students to synthesize the various modalities of language learning. So oftentimes you're interacting with two modalities of language learning at the same time anyway. You're listening and speaking, or you're reading and then writing about it. But an integrated performance assessment is really a chance to take the four modalities of language learning, synthesize them, and put them out all together, as opposed to in a vacuum. So one example that you'll see in Spanish B is a kid and his parent talking about the importance of cleaning his room on a daily basis. So the students get to listen to that. They do a brief writing after the fact of any important information they gleaned from that conversation. They add their own thoughts to that piece of writing. Then they have a chance to talk to a classmate about what they wrote, ask questions of that classmate about what he or she is sharing, and then get a chance to presentationally share what the duo spoke about to the larger group. So kind of an opportunity all at once to interpret language, either in writing, right? So either reading or listening, and then output language, writing or orally. We also look to embed lots of formative opportunities throughout. So it's not just the integrative performance assessment when students are being asked to synthesize the four modalities together. It's woven all throughout.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Ms. Moore on Spanish or French B? Ms. Raccio?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you about the length of each one of the units, I guess. So it seems like they're all 8 weeks in length, but each unit has between either 10 or 17 lessons. Does it just flow faster the further it gets into the year? And because this is the second year, is it reasonable to, it wouldn't impact the curriculum, but like Mrs. Medancy just said, there might be revisiting of things because of COVID and what was possibly not covered in 6th grade.
I think both of those things. There are chances for recycling and upcycling of learned concepts in 6th grade, but also we don't necessarily think of the lessons as actual days. So some of the lessons, using that word kind of loosely, some of the lessons that we've articulated have learning targets that are going to take more than one physical time together to really gain mastery of. And oftentimes we're cycling back to those lessons as we're moving on to other lessons and kind of weaving those learning targets together throughout the course.
Okay. That helps. I was just wondering how you got everything into nice little 8-week boxes.
It doesn't always work that way, but that's the goal.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? So we'll go ahead and take consensus on Spanish B first, and then we'll do French. So Spanish B, starting with Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
Ms. Raccio?
Yes.
You have your hand up. Did you want to say anything else?
Oh, no.
Okay. Mr. Votto?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. Corso, yes. Thank you. And then French B, Ms. Purcell?
Yes. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. Ms. Raccio?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
And Mrs. Corso, yes. Next for Ms. Moore, the Capstone curriculum.
The Capstone curriculum is broken up into 2 semesterized courses. The fall course is the Capstone Experience, and the spring course is the Capstone Project. This course is really a unique opportunity for students to chart their own path and have a lot of autonomy over what it is that they do in that classroom. The overarching challenge in this class is for students to take a personal strength or area of interest and pair it with something that will make a positive impact on those around them. So the fall is really spent on students kind of inventorying those areas of need and their areas of strength, and then overlaying their strengths with this identified area of need. They then determine the direction that their research and project will take. And by mid-October, mid to late October, they are submitting to the Capstone Committee their annotated bibliography, where they are sharing with us the relevancy, the accuracy, and quality of the research that they've done towards their statement of problem. They're also sharing their letter of intent to the Capstone Committee, where they outline what their project is, why it matters, what problem it solves, what they've learned so far through their research, what the impact of the project will be beyond just the student herself or himself, what they still need to do in terms of research, in terms of developing tools or systems, making community contacts, finding community or district mentors, and then ultimately what their final project will look like and what the timeline is for completion. Oftentimes they'll get feedback back from the Capstone Committee with some recommendations and suggestions for tweaking, but upon approval of their letter of intent and bibliography, the students start to work towards the completion of their project. The fall semester also really involves a great deal of peer collaboration. The students are in the class together. They're helping one another gain necessary feedback and constructive criticism as they make amendments. It's rare that you meet a capstone student whose project turns out exactly as they thought it would on day 3 of class. They work together through the bumps and the bruises that they experience, and they all help each other move along towards the completion of their final projects. In the spring semester, the class is no longer formally meeting every other day. However, the students meet with their capstone teacher on about a biweekly basis just to review the ongoing work and ensure that they are making appropriate progress towards the end game at the end of the spring semester. So by the end of the spring semester, students will have seen their project through to completion, and they will present a final presentation in which they will describe the focus of their project, the design, the research that drove it, the community partners and resources that were ultimately needed, how the project was implemented, and then the student reflects on the overall process from that first day in August through to this final presentation. It is a very unique class in that students are constantly being asked to demonstrate Wallingford's transferable skills. They are framing questions to design problems. They are persevering through challenges. They are catering their tone for the effectiveness of it to an appropriate, authentic audience. It's really an opportunity for students to use the skills that we wish for our graduates to possess upon the completion of their K-12 time here. And it's also a great class in that students really build connections with school and district personnel, as well as community members and stakeholders and mentors, as everyone sort of triangulates to help the student see through their vision and their mission.
Thank you. Any questions? I actually have a couple questions. So who's teaching the course? What types of teachers are teaching this course?
We aren't sure at this point who will be teaching it next year, but it does not require a specific certification. So if you're a certified high school teacher, it's a possibility that you could teach this course. In the past, there have been English teachers, a social studies teacher, world language teacher, I believe a CTE teacher. So it's very unique in that way that it's a revolving door, and the expertise of the staff member in the room could vary from room to room or year to year.
Same thing with the committee that you talk about. Who's part of the Capstone Committee?
The Capstone Committee consists of building administrators, school counselors, the Kim McLaughlin and Jane Greaves are college and career coordinators, also teachers that are currently teaching and have taught this course in the past, members of the curriculum coordinating committee. That's not what we're called, curriculum coordinators. So it's a nice representation of people from all over the district.
And then my last question. So the current class of 2023 has the MasteryBased Learning 1 credit requirement from the state, and this fulfills it?
Yes, this is one of the routes to fulfillment. Yes.
Right. We talked about all the other routes, but
Yep.
just for the sake of information.
Yes.
Right. To answer your question before, this year in particular, we had the highest number of requests for capstone than what we've previously experienced. And so we do have a great variety of staff members who are filling out their schedule with a section of Capstone. So Ms. Moore, at the start of the school year, given there'll be new people teaching the course, we'll meet with all staff prior to the start of the school year to kind of walk them through the curriculum and the expectations so that everybody's on an even playing field to start the school year. And then as we continue to grow over the course of the year, some of those alternate routes to the Mastery-Based Learning assessment, diploma assessment, will be able to have concrete student examples of how successful they were in the different pathways. And as we schedule for the next school year, the 22-23 school year, we'll be able to have concrete examples to share to help guide our students to find the right pathway that fits their needs.
Thank you. Any other questions about Capstone? I do particularly enjoy when the kids come to the board and give us a survey or a presentation, or, it's authentic and we get to see what they're really doing. So thank you for that. So let's take consensus. We'll start with Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
Ms. Raccio.
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds.
Yes.
Mr. Ross.
Yes.
Mr. Votto.
Yes.
Thank you. And Ms. Corso, yes. And I think that's all set for you, correct, Ms. Moore?
Yes, thanks so much.
Thanks for coming in. Have a great evening.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, so next we're going to talk, Mr. Covey dressed up for us tonight. Thank you, Mr. Covey. That was very nice of you. But you have quite a few items on the agenda, so we can go ahead and start with Wood Technologies.
So Wood Technologies is the grade 6 middle school wood curriculum. And it was an updating of the curriculum. There wasn't anything new in the world of 6th grade woodworking, but it's an updating, alignment to standards, work on some common assessments, and it's a lot of work on collecting the resources that many of the teachers may be using so that we could kind of get a little alignment between the two schools and between the teachers, and that there's a nice little package for people to work from.
Any questions about Wood Technologies? Ms. Purcell.
First off, I just have to ask Rob, why are you so dressed up?
The first and third Mondays of the month is I'm a Freemason, and we have Masonic meetings. And it just so happens that on the nights that I've had to present to the board, it happens to be a tux night at the lodge for me. It seems to be hitting the nights that I have to wear a tuxedo here. But the benefit of Google Meet, I get to be here and I could be in two places at once. That's wonderful.
Perfect. Well, but my request actually is not just for work, but for all the CTE curriculums you do. Okay. I love reading them and I really get involved, and I like the expectations and I like the activities, the standards. But my request is I always want to check the assessment to see if we're actually assessing students for all these expectations. And most of the assessments, when I hit the link, says that we have no access. So in the future, could you please just give us reading access or some way we can check the assessment so we can see what is happening? Because you do great work, and I'm sure it's a great assessment, but I feel that's part of our job to look at it. Thank you.
That's also an issue with the way we post our backup. We don't want to release our assessments to our students and families prior to. And before, when we used to print a hard copy of the assessments, you would be able to see them. But because all of your backup has to go online prior to the meeting, that's why we don't link the assessments to the public. So Rob can probably, Mrs. Purcell, share with you some of the examples so that you can see them. He'll email them to you later this week, but we hesitate to have that link open on the website for all of the public.
Can I just comment back?
Sure.
Carrie, all the other ones at least have a rubric. If I can at least have a rubric, because students should be able to have a rubric of what's being assessed. I don't have to have the actual test, but I'd like to kind of see what students are, being graded on.
Right. The rubrics, the reason also why it's pretty much straight across the board is I've just put everything in one top level folder. So rubrics, I could aren't assessments and could be shared, but it's just the consistency across the documents that anything that would fall into the assessments / rubrics are all in the same protected folder.
Okay.
So you make a good point about rubrics versus the assessment, but they were just kind of linked they just happen to be in the same place with the same permission.
All right. Because like you said, you do great work. I just love to see the completion part of it. Thank you.
I understand.
Ms. Raccio?
Gee, I don't know if I should speak now because I found some of the assessments and I had some questions on them. So I'm just wondering on the assessments, like I opened one that it was a multiple choice assessment.
For Wood?
It's in your packet. Are we only doing Wood now?
Well, there could
Yes.
be multiple choices for,
Okay.
there are other assessments, but
This was unit. I could wait.
unless it's
Well, my comment was actually for all of these because what I was hoping is that if we could do some reverse differentiation for students with special needs. So if many students need 14-point font as an example, or many students may need 1.5 line spacing. So if we could just build the assessments and maybe Mrs. Turner could come up with just a hit list of basic things for teachers to consider, there would be less work on the teachers who might have a student who has some of those needs. And if students don't need it at 1.5 line spacing, no big deal, it's there. But there would be less work for the teachers to go back and modify the assessments for each class where there's a student who has an IEP for it or a 504. So if I'm just thinking about, as I look through these, some of the wording was like tight in the multiple choice. And if we could just do that on the front end, it might help our teachers.
That's a good point. And I know one of the things that I have some teachers coming forward to do some work next week actually is to look at things like that as part of universal design for learning. And so I have a teacher mostly from each area to kind of work on that and look at some of the things that we have going on, especially some of the entry point topics that do show up in a lot of our CTE courses, like safety things and measurement and things like that show up in so many of our courses.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so let's take consensus on Wood Technologies first, starting with Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
Ms. Raccio?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
Yes, but I have to ask a question after you're done, okay?
Okay, Mrs. Corso, yes. So back to you, Mr. Votto.
Rob, you just mentioned something about measurement and stuff like that. I'm looking at these like Wood Technologies and out those classes and whatnot. Do these kids really know how to measure? Are they being taught that stuff in their math classes? You know how many?
They are being taught, but it is one of the challenges that we see where we work with the transfer of information. And it is very interesting to see that, yes, they know the concepts, but sometimes when working with fractions and measurement and math, and then they appear in a different place, it's as if, wait a minute, I don't do that work outside of math class. So that is one of the topics that we work with, for example, in CTE, is the application of all those things that happen in the other courses. And we know that they are being taught it. And when we work with the students, we could see that they actually do know the material, but sometimes they do struggle with the transfer or application. And that's where we come in and try and work on that with students in that regard.
Because I have seen kids struggle sometimes, you know, what an eighth of an inch is and a quarter of an inch and stuff like that. They don't, you know, we don't seem to concentrate too much on that stuff anymore, like, you know, how many bushels in a peck and all that kind of stuff. But they're irrelevant back then, as it is now. So maybe perhaps there should be some more maybe articulation between you and those people who would be teaching those subjects to be sure that the kids are kind of prepared, and it would make the shop teachers have an easier job too. I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Understood.
Thank you. Okay,
Well,
so,
it's unbelievable. I mean,
no, go ahead.
that's all right. Go ahead.
So our next unit is the CNC machining curriculum, and these are the 3 new machines that we purchased, correct?
It's for curriculum for a course that would work with those machines. Yes.
Yes, exciting. Go ahead, Mr. Covey.
Yeah, so I believe I brought this to you as a proposal this past fall, and then we worked together with the teachers and with representatives from Goodwin for training. And the way the training was designed would be to present the kinds of work and assignments and projects that would be used with students in a course like this. So step by step, as we were trained, we were step by step going through the curriculum, and that is basically what you see in that document. It's a result of the work that we've done all year long. We had 7 trainings with Goodwin, and the teachers have been working with it, and the teachers that will be teaching it next year are kind of reliving the training. I was with one teacher just a week or 2 ago who was kind of re-practicing some of the techniques that they learned, and we'll be ready to go in the fall with this, which is an exciting opportunity.
Any questions, comments? Just an observation, our state obviously is pushing manufacturing because of the amount of jobs that will be opening, and this is a super thorough curriculum. But I also noticed that one of the things in my job that I struggle with is trying to explain what manufacturing actually is. And saying it's the making of things isn't always enough. And I did notice all the way back in your middle school wood technologies curriculum, there is a piece in there that says what things are manufactured. So it's really helpful that they're getting introduced to that in the middle school. And then these courses that are available to them in the high school. It's obviously very thorough and thought out. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. That is a good connection, because wood is a kind of working with wood is a kind of manufacturing. And there's some fun videos that we found and we worked in there about like making ice cream, and there's a couple other fun ones that we found that we thought it'd be good to help expose to manufacturing and see the variety of things that are manufactured.
Right. And it's interesting to know what's actually manufactured in Connecticut, because we wouldn't always know that. Dr. Menzo?
Yes, I just wanted to comment that I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's something that Rob has worked very hard on, is making certain that we're trying to disclose and share in a way that's accessible to our parents and our students what technology means in terms of manufacturing, and what that technology is not just something that you use for coding. Technology is wood, and how we fashion it, and plastics, and all of those things. And another connection that I think the board and staff would be very pleased to see, as well as parents, is at the Center for Innovation and Design. We have taken, Kate O'Donnell has worked with Rob, every activity that the students are doing and participating in the center, and connecting it to a science or a field in manufacturing or technology, so that students say, okay, I did this today, but this is what it means to do it in the real world. And we've done that for starting in kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. So I just want to compliment Rob and the team, because they've really, we've asked them to do this, and I know that we asked them a lot, especially from the state, trying to get all this out to our students, and I think he's done an exceptional job.
Well, thank you, Sal. One of the other connections I just realized also was that in the wood technologies, you'll also see soft skills being referenced at 6th grade. And that's another connection that we're trying to thread through, so that it's not just what is manufacturing and what skills of how to operate a CNC machine, but we start to talk about attitudes and behaviors and reference to soft skills.
So important. Okay, so let's go ahead and take consensus on the CNC machining curriculum. We'll start with Ms. Purcell.
Yes, very excited about that.
Ms. Raccio?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
Yes, and I'm learning as I go along here, Rob. You're teaching me a lot.
We all can learn every day.
And Mrs. Corso, yes. So we're going to stick in the CTE department, but move over towards the business angle, correct? In sports and events marketing.
Yes, the next three pieces are all part of the high school business and finance curriculum. So the first one that's on the list, item G, is sports and event marketing, which was also one of the courses I brought to you in the fall. It's a new course that will be offered next year. And we thought this was as we made some adjustments with some curriculum, we thought it was another opportunity and another angle to expose kids to marketing. And we have seen within some survey work that we did that students seem to be interested in this area. And the concept of event marketing also starts to roll into even the work that we do within our culinary program with the cook's table and the third year management class. A lot of that does revolve around planning events, whether it's a pop-up shop or taking the food truck out, and that may be a small event, but it still goes into the same kinds of marketing and management and organization and planning and so forth. So we thought this was a good opportunity to add to our business department. And the state of Connecticut was also partnering with MBA Research, which is what the standards that we use to align to. And they have a very robust group of assessments and materials and guides and handouts and so forth. And I know that these folders in there are all kinds of assessments that we did include there, and there are quite a few multiple choice ones, Ms. Raccio, in these courses, I know in particular. But because it's so new, we're still working on exactly what the choice of the teachers will be as to what type of assessment. But there is a robust set of folders of materials for them to use with a brand new course, so that the teachers are happy to have that for support and as a resource.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, so let's take consensus on sports and event marketing, starting with Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
Ms. Raccio?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
Yes.
And Mrs. Corso, yes. Thank you. And then personal finance?
So personal finance, like the sports and event marketing, was also updated and aligned with the MBA research standards and the materials that were there. It was nice to see as we worked it that we were able to organize it very much as to what the teachers were already teaching in personal finance. So it's a just good update and refresh and align to standards for the personal finance as well. And it has the same big collection of resources and materials for teachers to use in this as well.
Questions? Approximately how many students end up taking personal finance?
Per year, I would say approximately, probably each year there might be 100 students each year that take it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Let's take consensus.
I was going to say, we also do personal finance as part of the middle school family consumer science program as well.
Yep.
So, which you will be seeing new. We have some exciting things to tell you about when we update the curriculum with that. So.
Any other comments? Let's take consensus starting with Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
Ms. Raccio?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
Yes.
And Mrs. Corso, yes. Last but not least, Business 101.
So Business 101, it's again, this was aligned with the MBA research materials. They call it Business Essentials, but the name of the course in our catalog was Business 101. And it's a good introductory course. We have lots of freshmen that take this course, and it really does explain to students what is business and what is accounting, finance, marketing, and so forth. And it really serves as a great introductory course for all our other business courses. It's really helpful when students take this course before taking other courses because it really helps them to understand or choose which course might be of interest to them. So it does cover a little bit of everything else that we would teach. And that's why it's like 101, that classic first level course number that you may see. So we're happy to have that updated and ready to go for the fall as well.
Questions? Business 101. Okay, let's take consensus starting with Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
Ms. Raccio.
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds.
Yes.
Mr. Ross.
Yes.
Mr. Votto.
Yes.
And Mrs. Corso, yes. Mr. Covey, thank you so much for coming in tonight, dressing up for us again. Enjoy. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great job, Rob.
Okay, moving on. Our next item of business is middle school ELA. There's some additional book titles for grade 8 units. And Ms. Laudadio, turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Carrie Laudadio, I'm the Secondary Humanities Coordinator. And this first item is a collection of graphic novel titles being proposed to be added to 3 of the existing grade 8 English language arts units. The titles were selected based on student interest and need according to reading level after the initial implementation of the units. Students across 8th grade classrooms have been consistently requesting additional graphic novel book club options to read during the units of study.
Thank you. Questions on these book titles?
I do.
Mr.
I had
Votto.
one. Carrie, so you're saying that the kids showed an interest in these books and that's where you get the idea to use these?
Yeah, we have existing in our units just a couple of graphic novels. We tried to, when we picked our initial titles, we had a wide variety of genres that we selected. And in particular, we have had our 8th graders across the district showing a keen interest in the graphic novel genre.
I mean, the teachers are expected to have read all these books, no?
No, because the teachers are using mentor text to teach the literacy skills, the reading skills, and then the students are applying the skills in the books of their choosing. So oftentimes the teachers have read most of them or a good number of them over time, but it's not something that they have to have read all of them.
It's just that I feel like if a group of kids are in a group and they're discussing a book that they've all read,
Yep.
and the teacher just walks over to that group, it might be hard for her or him to interject an idea that they think they should have brought up or something like that if they haven't read the book.
Yeah. I mean, it is ideal if the teacher has read the book, but the way book clubs work is giving students choice in titles to try to encourage and build reader engagement. So oftentimes there's this fine line of if you need to have had the teachers have read all of the books, then it holds the kids back in a lot of the different variety that we could offer to them. So some school systems actually will implement reading workshop with independent reads as well. Others use book clubs where there's the commonality of the books being discussed in small groups. Teachers have had training in how to facilitate book club conversations around questioning techniques. So if they've read the book, they can jump in with real detail. If they haven't read all of the books, they can do a lot of open-ended questioning to get to know if the students are understanding the skill that they're applying. So it's less about the book itself. It's more about the skill, the reading skill that they happen to be working on at the time.
Well, I don't want to give you a hard time, but I sort of disagree with that. I think the teachers really should know what the book has in it. And are we sure that these books don't have inappropriate things in them or material covered?
Yeah,
That's the other concern I have.
These books are good. These graphic novels have been well vetted.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Raccio?
Can we also add for the special needs students how these books can be accessed either through Learning Ally or through Bookshare? Last month we got curriculum and it was very nice to have it highlighted right there, the different ways students with special needs can access the audio files.
Absolutely. I could note which books are on Learning Ally, Bookshare, or Sora for audio.
Perfect.
Any other comments about additional 8th grade book titles? Let's take consensus starting with Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
Ms. Raccio?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
Yes.
And Mrs. Corso, yes. Thank you. Next curriculum is high school English, grade 9, a character unit monitoring for sense and complex text unit.
Yep. So I'm going to give a little bit of just an overview on high school English, and then I'll give a little intro to grade 9. I had some of these units came for your approval back in December. So just to kind of bridge since then, the high school English department has been working extensively with national literacy consultant and author Kate Roberts on building an understanding of the reading workshop and revising the curriculum to incorporate more strategic literacy instruction and choice in the English language arts classrooms. We started the work back in October of 2019 when a team of teachers visited an area high school to observe the reading workshop in a high school English classroom. Different from the K-8 English language arts curriculum, the reading and writing workshop at the high school level includes the building of a reading community around a complex whole class novel read in which key reading and literacy skills are taught. So that kind of gets at what you were asking about, Mike, in the high school English classroom. We do have that building of the reading community around the books that they get real detailed in, but they're also using those whole class reads as the vehicle to introduce the key reading skills in the unit. Students then work in books of their choosing, both in book clubs and or independently, to apply those skills with increased independence and agency. The high school curriculum launches an understanding of key skills needed in a workshop classroom through the first unit of the school year. This includes a focus on launching and sustaining independent reading, getting students acclimated with routines and classroom expectations, format of a reading workshop lesson, understanding levels of text complexity, which is significantly more complex at the high school level, small group work, and writing about reading. So really kind of acclimating students to what the difference will be from their prior experience in middle school with the reading workshop. You'll see in each unit a description of the components of a typical workshop lesson for teachers, such as mini lessons, small group work, whole class novel, etc., because this is one of the shifts in the revised curriculum. So we included that in there as information for the teachers as they become more and more familiar with it. And by the time students are in high school English, the focus in the workshop classroom shifts to the integration of the literacy instruction with more complex text and content. The big instructional shifts and moving to the workshop model include explicit instruction in reading and writing skills through concise mini lessons, application in both whole class novels and choice books, guided practice, small group work, and conferring and independent practice. Often in a high school classroom, and this is one of the big differences at the high school level, key literacy skills may be applied through more complex type of activities, including debates, Socratic seminars, or authentic application opportunities. So the 2 grade 9 ELA units, in grade 9 ELA, the course is entitled Literary Themes and Genres. There's 4 units total for the course. The first 2, Interpretation, Theme, and Synthesis, were approved in December of 2020. These are the 2 remaining units, Monitoring for Sense in Complex Text and Character. They are the first 2 units of the school year. The unit focused on monitoring for sense and complex texts will prepare students to become strategic readers in high school level texts, really kind of laying out for them the difference in more complex texts and content and further develop their literary analysis skills through the writing process. The unit on character teaches students to analyze both main and minor characters in books they're reading with independence and sophistication. Students will then continue to build their writing skills through the development of a character analysis. There will be a continued focus on building independence and agency or purposeful initiative in students through strategically planned out instruction. So if you haven't, I don't know if you have any questions on the grade 9 units.
Any questions or comments on grade 9?
Yep.
Ms. Raggio?
So for the grade 9 units, like this curriculum is going to be taught to honors, academic, and general level classes.
Yes.
So can you walk me through a little bit, like how we can ensure fidelity of instruction and consistency, you know, not just between two high schools, but even within one school, that one teacher feels is appropriate for a general class or an academic class is the same, and how teachers will differentiate that if they're teaching multiple levels?
Absolutely. So one of the main means of differentiation would be the complexity of the text. So with a whole class read, the teacher would select a text that's most appropriate for the level that they have, but it's also the part of the unit where they're doing a lot of guided practice throughout the text itself. And then from there, the pacing would be a piece of it as well. And then the big piece with the workshop model that helps us to really differentiate for the group of students that we have is keeping instruction really concise and allowing for a significant amount of time of guided practice and independent practice to allow the teacher time to touch base with either individual students through conferring or small groups as they seem to group students appropriately, whether it be by reading level or the book they chose to read, and really fostering the conversations through the questioning techniques that I mentioned earlier to ensure that they're comprehending what they're reading and also the application of the skills that were taught. So this really gets us away from that one size fits all approach that was in our existing curriculum and provides layers of opportunity for the teacher to differentiate throughout.
I've been out of high school with my family for a couple of years now, so I may be out of touch with this, but I thought that we stopped doing the whole class reads for more student choice and having the teachers give a list of options that would suffice for the unit that they were teaching.
So these units, so through these revised units, the pacing, you'll see that we've shortened the whole class read down significantly. The units run about 9 weeks long. Typically, we'd have a whole class read that would extend through a good portion of those 9 weeks. It's been shortened to 2 to 3 weeks to build that community of readers and to teach explicitly the reading skills that are a focus in any of the given units. And then the students have layered in after the whole class read book club choice reads that they apply those skills in through the remainder of the unit.
So are you saying the whole class read is not doing an entire book from start to finish?
So the teachers, so this is part of the big instructional shift and sort of the nitty gritty of some of the professional learning that we've been doing. Depending on the length of the whole class read that they're using, they pace it out and really have to prioritize and spend more time on what they identify as key pieces of the book and have students do some of the reading of that whole class read independently on their own, and then they reconvene and have conversations about it during class time. So they're really emphasizing certain pieces of the book, and we've spent time, and obviously it's still a work in progress as we're still, just going through the approval process, and we'll be executing these units for the first time, going through and really pacing out and identifying the pieces of the novel that are the most relevant for teaching the skills that are built into the unit. And really kind of, working with the teachers on letting go of what they've done in the past, where they were spending longer amount of time on really the whole book.
So from what you just said, I'll assume that all the teachers will be given guidance as to what the highlights are in the books, as opposed to every teacher deciding on their own.
Yep.
Okay. I'll turn it back to you, Mrs. Corso, but I don't know if I'm done. You're muted.
Muted. I just want to get a sense of this. In an 8 or 9 week unit, there's like 2 to 3 weeks of a whole class novel, and the remaining weeks are back towards the choice like they have in middle school, correct?
Yep.
And then those whole class books, I know we get lists. Are the one book that they do for 2 to 3 weeks, is that chosen for them? There's specific ones, or do teachers get a choice in that?
They still have a choice off of the approved anchor list.
Right, that's the anchor book.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
And I actually see a lot of value in that when you have a whole class and then go down or break out into smaller choice books in multiple ways, because when a teacher chooses a text, the teacher is obviously feels that text is very important and valuable. And when a student doesn't think that, that's a really valuable learning experience as well, that they can disagree and tell us why you're disagreeing with that. So I'm glad we still have some whole class discussion. Because the other thing that sometimes I see happens when my kids have choices in book clubs, they gravitate to the same books that their friends choose. And so in a whole class, you get to hear lots of different opinions rather than that same small group that they gravitate towards every time. Ms. Raggio?
Totally agree, Mrs. Corso.
We're on the same page, Mr. Votto.
No.
Write that down. Ms. Raggio.
One of the things that I looked at were the graphic organizers that were in here, and they were okay. I'm just used to more advanced ones because we use them routinely. But I wished that they were broken apart, like to open a file and have 16 pages. I wish that they were broken apart and aligned more with the lesson. Like I felt like the teacher would be able to use it more if the links were, maybe it's 8, maybe it's 5 graphic organizer like links. But I just kind of, there were good things in there, like the bingo cards for some of the things. And I was like, wow, if a teacher has to go to the curriculum, get to that part of the lesson, then get into the graphic organizer and find this on page 11, it might get lost. So if it was an easier way for them to utilize that tool, and knowing that that's graphic organizers are very often used, especially for students with special needs. So if it was aligned up better with where it clearly fit, it might get more use.
No, that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
And then my only other thing was, again, with the book club titles, pages 15 and beyond, if you could put in what's available via audiobook, that'd be great.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions? Grade 9. Mr. Votto, did you have something else?
No, sorry.
That's okay. Okay, thank you. So let's go ahead and take consensus on grade 9 literary themes, with the assumption that links to audiobooks and audio sources will be included. Are we good with that? Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Ms. Raggio?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
Yes.
And Mrs. Corso, yes. Our next item. Let's see, where are we? Okay, so grade 10.
Grade 10. So similar structure to grade 9. Grade 10, English Language Arts, the course is World Literature. Similar to grade 9, there's 4 units. The first 2 units were approved in December of 2020. These are the remaining 2 units, Understanding Cultural Differences and Complexity and Change and Characterization. They're also the first 2 units for the school year. In grade 10, students are reading current and classic world literature and thus need skills as readers to build a cultural knowledge of another time or place. The unit focused on understanding cultural differences will help students become powerful, independent readers when they consider both setting and character clues to best understand what they are reading. Also in this unit, students will research and develop a literary essay focused on comparing and contrasting 2 or more cultures and/or perspectives. The Complexity and Change Characterization unit provides students with the skills to grapple with complex characters and track subtle shifts in them across texts. Students will learn to identify and infer ways that characters are complicated. Also in this unit, students will develop an argument essay in which they will develop their own claims based on big important ideas from the books they read, supporting the ideas with carefully chosen evidence and exploring themes, issues, and lessons relevant to both the stories and making connections whenever possible to their own lives. That's sort of my big intro. So if you have any questions.
Questions, grade 10.
Just audio links.
So let's take consensus on grade 10 world literature with the assumption that audio links will be provided as well. Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Ms. Raccio?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
Yes.
And Ms. Corso, yes. Thank you. Our next is economics. And that's you as well, Ms. Laudadio, correct?
That is me as well. The textbook is first, correct?
Yes, the economics textbook. correct.
Okay, so the economics textbook, we had a review committee look at 3 texts to replace the existing economics textbook, which has a copyright date of 2005. The committee reviewed texts from Pearson, AMSCO, and Cengage, and are recommending the Pearson title, Economics, for adoption. The book was selected because of the content and sequence of topics were aligned well with the main concepts and skills included in the revised curriculum. The order of topics that we felt was logical and helps build a solid understanding of economic concepts for students. The text provides relevant examples and problems presented in a logical manner, contains current connections and topics that are relevant for high school students, at least we thought so anyway. Finally, the supplemental materials and online features were engaging and effective to support instruction.
Thank you. Any questions about the economics textbooks? This is, we teach AP macro and micro.
We teach AP economics, which includes both micro and macro.
So that's a different textbook, correct?
That is a different textbook, yeah.
Oh, and what's the enrollment like in these classes? Do you know how many sections we run of the college prep economics classes?
We currently have a section at each high school. I'd have to look up exact numbers. I'm going to say it's just above or right around 20.
So is it a half-year course or a full-year course?
It's a half-year course.
It's a half-year course.
Yeah.
So are we purchasing one set of textbooks that we're sharing between both high schools, or are we purchasing one set for each high school?
We're purchasing a class set for each high school because next year we have one class running at each high school.
And they may run in the same semester.
Yes.
There's no guarantee that they run opposite.
Right. We never specified fall or spring with it, so.
Any questions about economics textbook? Let's take consensus starting with Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
Ms. Raccio?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
Yep.
And Mrs. Corso, yes. Thank you. And then last but not least, the high school elective controversies and conspiracies curriculum.
I think, is the economics curriculum on there first?
It
Or
is. You
no?
did
Yeah.
skip it.
I
It was
skipped
before
it.
the textbook. Yeah.
Jeez. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's
Just
okay.
we want to make sure that we do both.
Yep. And so the revised curriculum corresponds with the textbook adoption. It's a half-year high school social studies elective offered to juniors and seniors. From a broad lens, the course explains how and why people and societies make economic choices. Students explore macro and microeconomic principles in order to understand both the American and global economic systems, as the course is comprised of 3 units. Unit 1 is sort of basic fundamentals of economics. Unit 2 is focused on microeconomic principles, and Unit 3 on the macroeconomic principles.
Questions on the curriculum piece? My questions would have been answered had I gone in order. I apologize. Let's take consensus, starting with Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
Ms. Raccio?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
Yes.
And Mrs. Corso, yes. And back to controversies and conspiracies curriculum.
Yeah. So the controversies and conspiracies course proposal was approved this past fall to replace the existing high school social studies elective controversies in today's society. Controversies and conspiracies is a half-year social studies elective that will be offered to juniors and seniors. The curriculum as a whole hinges on teaching students critical thinking skills in the age of fake news. Controversies and Conspiracies course offers students an opportunity to examine some of society's most significant and interesting issues. It course aims to develop students' critical consciousness and a deep understanding of modern media communication. The 4 course units include national security, the environment, sports and culture, and science and technology. And I don't know if you recall from the proposal why we made this shift, but the current course, Controversies in Today's Society, really hadn't had significant enrollment, and we wanted to try to bring more of a critical thinking skills foundation to it. So that was one of the more significant reasons behind the shift. And I'm glad to report we currently have the course enrolled at both schools finally next year.
Ms. Purcell?
That was part of my question, how many? So that's good. I just want to say, I loved reading this curriculum. I would love to take this class, and I really think it's needed in our present day in the world right now. So thank you for putting that together.
I would love to share that one of the days we worked on this curriculum happened to be January 6th, and it was a fascinating day of conversation with the curriculum committee.
Mr. Votto?
Yeah, is there a book with this? Probably not.
Not a textbook. We have a teaching supplemental resource that we purchased for the teachers, as well as the instructional leader, fact or fiction, teaching of critical thinking skills during an age of fake news, to really make sure that the underlying skill piece is the main, driving force and thread throughout all of the content units.
I concur with Mrs. Purcell. I would love to take this course myself.
Well,
I'm so happy to see this.
Feel free to come anytime. They would love to have you. We're very excited about this course.
No, I might get up and start teaching, so you wouldn't want that.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah, you counted it. What are we up to? 3 students now? I want to take the course too. I just think it's a great idea, and I still have, I'm still teaching college, and I can't wait to I hope this is widespread throughout different districts, because I can't wait to start getting students that can actually, kind of go through all that material and pick out the, either the good part or the bad part. But
so we've had this course running at Sheehan pretty consistently, and I know she'll kill me for saying this, but Heather Smalley is like, there's no words. Like I've never seen somebody with this content knowledge. So if you want to see, I'm really excited that it's going to be up and running at Lyman Hall. But she blew me out of the water. Like she was born to teach this class.
Thank you.
Mr. Votto, do you have your hand up?
Oh, no. I mean, I do, but I'm not supposed to.
So I understand the interest in this course, but I'm not gonna lie, I am concerned about very hot topics that come up. Even saying fake news in and of itself is controversial because some may think it's fake news, some may not. So the teacher has a very difficult job in presenting information without bias.
Correct.
So I think I'm just concerned about what could come out of this course. I think it's really valuable. Again, I think it's authentic when kids engage in this. But I would like to see some sort of, not rules, but rules almost of engagement prior to really difficult subjects. Mr. Votto?
Now, you knew I was going to raise my hand after that. First of all, I really think you got to give some autonomy to teachers. I think you have to respect their, what they think is right and wrong, how to teach a course. We hope no teacher ever uses bias in anything they teach, number one. Number two, I think maybe in Carrie's defense, using the word fake news is not saying there is fake news, but that's the topic today. Whether there is or not. Am I right?
Yeah. That is it's helping students discern. It's to both of your points. And honestly, I was going to say, Erin, as well, that it's sort of the thread across the social studies department as a whole, even though this is one of our elective courses, is teaching tough topics without bias is one of the key focus for our PD next year, but our teachers are also keenly aware that is their role. And it's helping students. So, when you're studying controversies and conspiracies, it just provides you with more topics that tend to have topics or issues or research that lend themselves to students being able to think critically about that. But no matter what the curriculum, that is always our goal, is to teach without bias, and to have students be presented with multiple sources of information on any topic and have them grapple with it on their own. But the teaching resource that we got with this particular course really kind of keys students into certain sources of news that would be less credible, how to be on the lookout for them, so that then they transfer those skills to other courses or even into life beyond high school. They're a little bit more savvy in those areas of critical thinking.
Thank you. I do think that we don't learn from like-minded people. We learn from people who are thinking and experiencing different things than we are. So I just hope going into it that everybody has that mindset, that open mindset. And that's, unfortunately, I think it's so charged these days. The atmosphere is so negatively charged. And if we could shift that mindset and understand that we're just gonna have to agree to disagree. And that's one of the really good things about our country, is that we are allowed to do that. So, it'll be an interesting course. I'll be interested to see what plays out with that. Thank you.
Agreed.
Any other questions or comments? Dr. Menzo.
I just wanted to say that I agree with what you're saying, Erin. I think that it might also benefit our teachers, because I agree with what both Mr. Votto and Ms. Corso were saying. It's a balance, but it might also benefit our teachers beyond just having them learn about the curriculum and understand how to have those conversations. Also, and I hate to say this, but also be aware of their responsibilities as a teacher in terms of the lines that they can walk up to, but they can't cross, because none of them want to cross the line. Teachers want to do what's right for their students and want to do what's right for our district and for community, but sometimes they don't know what those parameters are. So that might be a nice conversation to have with one of our attorneys. If they'd be willing to do a 10, 15-minute just quick primer on what should be and what can be taught in the schoolhouse. We know that there were many federal cases that provided parameters for teachers, just so they don't find themselves passionate about something, which there's nothing wrong with, and we don't want to censor them, but we also know that sometimes in our society that and in the responsibility as a teacher, it puts them in an awkward position. And I know, again, our teachers are only there to do what's right and what's best, and their best intentions sometimes could be thwarted or misinterpreted. And if we can get some, professional support for them and just explaining to them the parameters, not about censorship, but just giving them those parameters, I think that might be helpful. It's just a humble recommendation. I don't know if it's, I just feel for the people who are teaching this, because I know they're going to be passionate, but I also don't want them to be in a position where they have to defend what they taught, all along the way.
I think they would appreciate that. I appreciate the suggestion.
Mr. Votto?
I was just going to bring up an example. It is hard to find that balance. And I can remember when I taught 6th grade world history, we had to teach the 3 major religions. And that was something that I really had to think about, because you can't sound like you're for one religion over another, but you had to teach them objectively what each religion, that kind of thing. And it was very hard. As a teacher, you have to know where your boundaries are. So I think that's something that often needs to be repeated and often needs to be reminded, because especially today in this social world that we're going through, it will be a difficult course to teach and keep unbiased, but I have faith that they'll do it.
Ms. Purcell?
I was going to say, it's not really much different than a health teacher who has to teach topics that are very touchy and can cause a lot of angst for a lot of people. And I know that health teachers are really appreciative when they know what the boundaries are, kind of thing. And it just makes you feel as a health teacher, okay, I can do this because I've got my back, kind of thing. And so I think if you can do that for any sensitive issues here, that will help.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah, I was looking at the kind of scanning through like the science technology and, having a science background. I mean, that is critical though. I mean, when you start getting into the politics or opinions and stuff like that, yes, it's like Dr. Menzel said, there's that line. But I'll be honest with you, in most of the past, especially last year and a half, but last even 10 years, believing in some conspiracy when it deals with science and technology, not what we used to call it junk science, can be dangerous. I mean, very, very dangerous. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, so let's go ahead and take consensus on this elective course. It's 11th and 12th graders, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. The Controversies and Conspiracies curriculum. Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Ms. Raccio?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah.
Mr. Ross?
Absolutely.
Mr. Votto?
Yes.
Thank you. And Mrs. Corso, yes. Thank you. So, Ms. Laudadio, that concludes your presentation. Thank you so much for coming in tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, so moving on, other business and possible consensus to temporarily suspend. Actually, I'll turn this over. Mrs. Latour, is this you or is Mrs. Latour? Go ahead.
So we are in the process of finalizing our student rosters for summer school. And as you know, the last 15 months have been terribly difficult for our students and for our staff in terms of keeping kids engaged. The passing of classes and the need for credit recovery has been paramount. So when we look at middle school and high school in particular, as you know, we always run the elementary summer program for reading and mathematics. And for credit recovery, we have a board policy that was last revised in the early 2000s that kind of gave some parameters and guidelines for summer school. And due to the pandemic, I am asking the board to temporarily suspend 2 sections of this regulation for just summer school 2021 to allow, under the principal's discretion, students into summer school for credit recovery that may have less than a 50 average for the year in a full year class, or potentially has a failure in more than 2 classes. And the reason why I would like to leave that to the principal's discretion is they make recommendations to the 2 summer school directors. They are very much in collaboration with our students and our students' families, our school counselors, and our teachers to look at how students have progressed from the first semester into the second semester. And for the kids who are really trying very hard to make up missed work, to raise their grades. And we do want to give and afford every opportunity for flexibility for some of our families to retrieve credit for this summer going into the following year. We have prioritized some of our student rosters, obviously with our juniors first and our sophomores. Our freshmen can work towards credit recovery in the coming school year as well. But I was asked if I could bring this to the board. I support that request completely because the students and families and staff are working very, very hard to catch up from what has been a very, very challenging year. So it is a temporary suspension. It's not forever, but it is for this summer school term of 2021 that I'm asking for the suspension of that under the principal's discretion. Mr. Vado?
All right. Specifically, what part are you saying that you want to suspend? The whole thing? The whole policy?
So sections A and B, and C, I want there to be leeway in all 3 actually, as I'm looking at it, because at the middle school, the minimum grade for failure is a 50 anyways. So that meets the criteria of this policy, but for high school, it is not. It's a 40%. We have some students who are failing more than 2 classes, and it's by such a slight margin that they wouldn't be eligible for that 3rd class to try to recover credit. So I am asking for some leeway in sections A, B, and C. And again, under the principal's discretion. We're not talking about students who, and we have them, who haven't attended, who haven't done anything, who have made no attempt to retrieve, to recover, to hand in missing work. We're talking about students who have been working collaboratively with their teachers, with their school counselors, with the administration to try to recover some of the learning loss.
Can you just explain the last sentence in A?
Yep. Any middle
Does that
school
mean
student,
that if 3 or more, they don't pass?
correct.
That means they stay back a year. Is that what that means?
Correct. Yep. Yes, it is correct.
Okay. Well, the only comment I'm going to make is I'm glad you said what you said at the end. There are students who purposely did not do the things they were supposed to do when they had the opportunity. I wouldn't want to see them get by. I'm sorry to say. I do think COVID and all that, we do might probably have to make some.
You know, our thought,
Different decision.
honestly, moving forward was this has been a very unusual, year and a half. And, we really are trying very hard as a school system, each high school, each middle school, as a faculty, working together, supporting our students and families to get them back on the path to learning. And we feel like for those students who are in the process of trying to recover some learning lost in the pandemic, that we wanted to afford them as much flexibility as humanly possible if they're willing to put the time and the effort in for summer school to continue to regain some of that credit. We want to be able to allow them to do so.
So I would assume the principal and the teacher would have a conversation about these kids and what to do, right? Because
Yeah,
I mean, these teachers have worked so hard,
of course.
and in vain at many times with certain kids. And I just wanted to mean something that they did do all that work. All right, as long as they talk to, the principal and the teacher talk together and they just
Yeah. And the principals and
which kids
teachers
fit
have worked with the families as well. So, when we started looking at our student rosters, back in April and March and having those, very difficult conversations with families about where their child was and, which courses they were struggling in. I mean, they really, as a school community, in partnership with these families, have worked really hard over the last, 12 weeks. And, some kids it's a razor thin margin of where their grade point average is or where their final average is in relation to this policy. And we want to be able to give them that opportunity to move ahead with credit recovery. Mrs. Corso, do you have a question too?
Yes, I was kind of getting at the same thing. I'm assuming this is a team decision and not left solely up to the admin. The final decision is with the admin, but there's other players, correct?
The admin have been working with the school counselors. They've been working with the classroom teachers. They have been working with all the support personnel as well as the families and students.
Yeah.
And so they are ready to, dependent on your decision, to move forward with, the students that have been putting forth the effort, to recover.
And
so
there is extra time, and I'm sure that the teachers and the counselors are chasing kids down because they are getting out at, what time do they get out in high school? 12:20. So there is until 2:00 to be meeting individually with students and things like that. So for students to who are doing that and are still failing, absolutely 100%. But for students who are, MIA, I would understand why teachers and admin would have a hard time allowing this. And honestly, if they're that MIA, then what they would get in the summer is not necessarily, they would need to repeat it anyway, because we want our students to master certain content.
Correct. Absolutely correct. We're not, the importance of learning, the importance of having grade level standards, the importance of all of those things for a student who really has not done the majority of what is needed. That is a clear indicator of what path that person needs to take. At the high school level in particular, they have been doing credit recovery since March. Teachers are putting in the time after school hours in the evening with students, in addition to having the list of kids, obviously, that they're recommending for summer coursework. We don't want to have the limitations that this policy affords as a black and white. We want to be able to look at each case individually in terms of what a student needs and make recommendations. Mrs. Raccio?
Given the executive orders that we have this year, as it relates to attendance, should we just be waiving this entire policy, not just section 1? Because there could be a student who missed more than 2 days of the class, but completed all the work, and we can't not.
The attendance part of this regulation is summer school attendance. So if the child's enrolled in summer school and misses more than 2 classes, given summer school is a condensed amount of time, they have the ability to lose credit in summer school. We haven't experienced that typically in the last at least 4 years I've been in the office. Our student attendance during credit recovery summer programming has been very strong. Students have worked very hard, as the teachers have as well, to put in the effort and the work necessary to regain credit.
And so is the executive order written just through the end of the academic year and it doesn't cover summer school?
Regarding student attendance?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and check. I'm not sure there is, unlike when we were out in the spring of last year where attendance wasn't addressed. I'd have to look at what the wording is, Mrs. Raccio, to take a look and understand it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we had to waive it all. That's all I was wondering. All right.
Also, Mrs. Latour, is this all in-person summer school?
So actually, we're still working those details out. We had a large amount of staff who have applied to work summer school. Some are most of it is in person. Some said they would do whatever, in person or virtual. And so when we look at middle school and high school in particular, we have the ability, dependent on what the student needs, to do either. And, again, we're taking the mindset as we're planning to be as flexible as humanly possible, because we want to be able to offer as many courses as we can to help our students. So if we have a teacher, for example, at the elementary level who can only do it virtually, and we have students who only want virtual, we're going to put that class together because it's a win-win. So our directors are working feverishly at this point to enroll and to get everybody's student rosters at the elementary level. We're very fortunate that we have not only elementary literacy and math programming, we have our EL bilingual summer school running for both elementary and secondary students. We have enrichment opportunities for all students at varying levels, from health and wellness to music, art classes, theater. So we're really programming very broadly this summer. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without the staff coming up with some really great ideas and participating in summer work. And of course, we have students who are more than thrilled to come in and take either an enrichment class or just kind of keep their skills sharp at the younger level and have the opportunity to recover credit at the upper level.
I just think it's important that we stress as much in-person learning as we can.
Yep, absolutely.
I think there should be pretty strict criteria or a specific reason as to why a student wouldn't be in person, and articulate that to the appropriate personnel. But I think in-person learning is most important at this point.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Ross?
What happens if the student goes into quarantine?
For summer school?
Summer school.
We would do similar to what we're doing now. The student we would work with the student and the student's family. If someone has to go into quarantine that's been in summer school, we're looking at having to quarantine the summer's class. And then we would need to find alternate routes to instruct so that they still get the benefit of instruction.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx anything, but we had a really good week in Wallingford.
Yes, we did. Keep your fingers crossed.
Any other comments, questions? We'll go ahead and take consensus on summer school, starting with Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
Ms. Raccio?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
So we're just suspending this for this year, for right now.
Correct.
Yes.
And Mrs. Corso, yes.
Thank you.
So-
I appreciate it.
No problem. So that's it. There's no further business to come before the board. This meeting is adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Right.
Amy, I just want to say congratulations